The first sign something was wrong wasn't panic. It was silence. At exactly 6:12 a.m., the city woke the way it always did, traffic humming, elevators climbing, phones lighting up with urgency. But inside the penthouse overlooking the river, Julian Cross did not. His bed was untouched. The coffee machine, programmed to start at 6, blinked patiently into an empty room. His phone lay on the kitchen counter, face down, fully charged. No missed calls yet. No alarms ignored. Just a deliberate absence where a man should have been. By 7 a.m., his driver waited downstairs longer than usual. By 8:15, his executive assistant stopped pretending everything was normal. Julian Cross did not run late. Julian Cross did not forget meetings. Julian Cross did not vanish. And yet, on this morning, the most powerful man in the room was nowhere to be found. The boardroom filled without him. Chairs slid back. Tablets lit up. Coffee cooled untouched as eyes kept drifting to the empty seat at the head of the table, the one no one else ever dared occupy. The agenda remained frozen on the screen, as if proceeding without him felt illegal. "He's unreachable," Mara said finally, breaking the quiet. Her voice was steady, but her fingers were clenched around her tablet hard enough to ache. All lines. Personal and secure. A murmur rippled through the room. "Unreachable how?" someone asked. "Dead zones exist." "Not for him," another replied. "Not ever." Security footage began to play. Julian's car exited the underground garage at 5:41 a.m. No driver. No escort. No secondary vehicle. Just the car slipping into the city like it had somewhere private to be. Someone swore under their breath. "He wouldn't do this without reason," a board member said, trying to sound confident. "There has to be an explanation." Mara didn't answer. Because when she'd gone into his office that morning, something had been wrong. Not messy. Not chaotic. Too clean. The desk cleared. The drawers empty. Even the framed photo he never talked about, the one that never changed, was gone. Julian Cross hadn't forgotten to show up. He had chosen not to. Miles away, far from glass towers and emergency meetings, Julian stood on a quiet street where no one knew his name. The place hadn't changed much. Same narrow road. Same faded storefronts. Same cracked sidewalk he remembered from another lifetime. Only he had changed sharper, older, heavier with years of decisions that couldn't be undone. He checked the address again, even though he already knew it by heart. A small building. Warm light behind the curtains. Ordinary in every way success had taught him to avoid. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. Julian exhaled slowly and slid the phone back without looking. For 20 years, he had built an empire by showing up everywhere he was expected to be. This was the first place he had avoided. The door opened before he could knock. She stood there, framed by soft yellow light, surprise flashing across her face before settling into something quieter. He noticed the gray at her temples, the strength in the way she stood, the calm that came from surviving without him. Neither of them spoke at first. "You disappeared," she said, finally, not accusing, not relieved. Just honest. Julian nodded once. "For 24 hours. Her eyes searched his, as if measuring whether that was all he planned to lose or everything. Some disappearances are escapes. Others are returns. And Julian Cross had just begun the most expensive reckoning of his life. She didn't invite him in right away. That was the first thing Julian noticed. Years ago, the door would have opened wide. There would have been warmth, questions, confusion tangled with hope. Now, she stood in the doorway like a guard, calm, unmoving, giving nothing away. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know. And yet," she replied, tilting her head slightly, "you are." The silence between them stretched, thick with everything they'd rehearsed in their own heads for years, but never said aloud. Julian became acutely aware of how small the space felt, how different it was from boardrooms and penthouses where silence obeyed him. Finally, she stepped aside. 24 hours, she said, walking back into the apartment. "That's all you get." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have. Inside, the apartment smelled like home, something Julian hadn't felt in decades. Not luxury, not polish, just warmth. Faded furniture, books stacked unevenly. A plant by the window that leaned toward the light like it trusted it would be there tomorrow. "You still keep it warm," he said quietly, unsure why that detail mattered so much. She shrugged. Some habits don't disappear just because people do. The words landed exactly where she meant them to. Julian swallowed. I didn't disappear. She turned then, eyes sharp but not cruel. You vanished. There's a difference. He nodded. There was no defense that wouldn't insult both of them. You've been gone a long time, Julian. I know. And now, she asked, you wake up one morning and decide to remember? He reached into his coat and pulled out the folded document, the one that had undone him. He placed it gently on the table between them, like something fragile. You sent this, he said. Her gaze dropped to the paper. She didn't touch it. I didn't think you'd read it. I read it 3 times. And still came. Yes. She exhaled, slow and controlled, then sat. Julian followed, keeping a careful distance, as if sudden movement might shatter what little permission he'd been given. You didn't come because of me, she said quietly. You came because something scared you. Julian looked down at his hands. They were steady. That unsettled him. You were right, he said. I've been living like time was infinite. And now I know it isn't. She studied him, the tailored coat, the tired eyes, the way his confidence had softened into something almost human. You missed everything, she said. Birthdays, first steps, questions I couldn't answer. The word everything echoed. Julian's chest tightened. I know. No, she corrected gently. You don't. Knowing requires staying. That was when the sound came from the hallway. Light footsteps. Familiar. Unhurried. Julian looked up, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. A young woman stepped into the room, phone in hand, pausing mid-step when she noticed him. Their eyes met. Her expression shifted, not shock, not recognition. Something quieter. Something instinctive. Mom, she said. Whose? She stopped when Julian stood. The air changed. Something unspoken passed between them, sharp and undeniable. Julian felt it like a physical blow, the kind that knocked the breath from your lungs before you realized you'd been hit. The young woman frowned slightly, studying his face. You look like someone I know, she said slowly. Her mother's voice barely carried when she spoke. Julian, she said, this is. The young woman's phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. Wait, she said, her voice suddenly unsteady. Say that name again. Julian couldn't move, couldn't speak. She took a step closer. My dad's name, she whispered. That was my dad's name. The room seemed to tilt. Outside, the city carried on, unaware that an empire was crumbling, not from scandal or loss, but from a truth that had finally found its way home. Julian Cross had vanished for 24 hours. And in that time, everything he'd avoided had finally found him. If you were in her place, standing face to face with a man who disappeared from your life, without explanation, would you want answers or distance? Let me know what you think as we move into Act 3, Resistance. No. The word didn't come from Julian. It came from her. She stepped back as if the space between them had suddenly turned dangerous, her hand pressing flat against her chest like she needed to steady her heart. The resemblance she'd noticed a second ago, his eyes, the shape of his mouth when he frowned, now felt like a betrayal her mind was scrambling to reject. No, she said again, firmer this time. That's not possible. Her mother moved immediately, placing herself between them without even realizing she'd done it. Protective, instinctive, a habit built over years. Lena, she said softly. Let's sit down. Lena shook her head. Don't say my name like that. Don't, she gestured vaguely between them, her voice rising. Don't stand there and look at me like I'm a math problem you're suddenly trying to solve. Julian finally found his voice, though it felt like forcing air through glass. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you I didn't know. That's supposed to help? Lena snapped. You didn't know you had a daughter? So what surprise? A bitter laugh escaped her. Congratulations. Her mother closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again, steady as ever. This isn't how I planned for you to find out, she said. I didn't even plan for you to find out at all. Julian turned to her sharply. You were never going to tell her? She met his gaze without flinching. I was never going to let her be disappointed. The words landed hard. Julian felt something twist in his chest, guilt sharpening into something uglier. You decided that for me? I decided it for her, she replied. Because I was there when you weren't. Silence crashed down again, heavier this time. Lena crossed her arms, retreating toward the wall as if distance could reorganize reality. So this is why you disappeared, she said, not looking at him. Midlife crisis with a plot twist. Julian flinched. He deserved that and worse. I didn't disappear to find you, he said carefully. I disappeared because I was afraid. That finally got her attention. Afraid of what? She asked. Of finding out how much damage I'd done. Her laugh this time was short and humorless. Too late. Across the city, the panic had reached its peak. By hour 12, speculation had escaped the building. News alerts buzzed. Social media churned. Anonymous sources whispered about internal coups, secret illnesses, hostile takeovers. Julian Cross's absence had become a vacuum the world was desperate to fill. Mara stood in Julian's office again, phone pressed to her ear. No, she said sharply. We don't release a statement yet. A pause. Yes, I understand the pressure. Another pause longer. No, she repeated, quieter now. Because if he wanted to be found, he would have checked in. She ended the call and stared out over the city. She knew Julian better than most. If he was silent, it wasn't because he was lost. It was because he was facing something he'd avoided for years. Back in the apartment, Lena grabbed her jacket. I'm going out, she said. I need air. She stopped, eyes flashing toward Julian. I need space. Her mother nodded. I'll come with you. No, Lena said. I don't want an audience. She paused at the door, then turned back once. You don't get to follow me, she said to Julian. You don't get to explain yourself. You don't get to fix this today. Julian nodded slowly. I understand. That somehow made it worse. The door closed behind her, leaving a silence that felt unfinished. Julian sank into the chair he'd barely touched earlier, suddenly exhausted. She hates me. She doesn't know you, her mother corrected. Hatred requires familiarity. Then what does she feel? She sat across from him, folding her hands. Shock, anger, grief. For what? For the version of her life she thought was settled, she said. And for the one she now has to re-examine. Julian stared at the floor. I didn't come to destroy her world. I know, she said gently. But intention doesn't soften impact. He looked up at her, eyes rimmed with something dangerously close to regret. What do you want me to do? She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing 20 years of silence against one day of courage. For now, she said. Nothing. That answer terrified him more than anything else. Because doing nothing was what he'd always been good at. And this time, it might cost him everything. Do you think distance is protection or avoidance? If you were Lena, would you shut him out completely? Or give him a chance to speak? Share your thoughts as we move on. Lena didn't go far. She walked 3 blocks before the weight in her chest forced her to slow, then stop altogether. The city moved around her, cars passing, strangers brushing past, laughter drifting out of a nearby bar, but everything felt distant, muffled, like she was underwater. A father. Her father. The word felt foreign, almost insulting. She pressed her palms against a cold brick wall and closed her eyes. Every unanswered question she'd buried over the years came rushing back with cruel clarity. Why her mother avoided certain topics. Why old forms had always listed unknown. Why she'd grown up believing that love was something you earned by being easy to leave. Her phone buzzed. Mom. She ignored it. Back at the apartment, Julian stood at the window, watching the street below like a man waiting for a verdict. Every minute that passed without Lena's return felt like punishment he had no right to resent. You can't leave, her mother said quietly, breaking the silence. Julian turned. I wasn't planning to. Good, she replied. Because if you do, you'll confirm everything she fears. He nodded slowly. Then I'll stay. She studied him, measuring the difference between words and resolve. Staying doesn't mean hovering. It means being available without demanding forgiveness. I can do that, he said. She gave a faint, sad smile. We'll see. The forced proximity came not from emotion, but logistics. That evening, the power went out. No warning. No storm. Just a sudden darkness that swallowed the apartment whole. The refrigerator cut off. The heater died mid-cycle. The quiet that followed was immediate and unsettling. Her mother sighed. The building's old. This happens. Julian instinctively reached for his phone, then stopped. No signal. No solutions to purchase. No assistance to dispatch. I have candles, she added, already moving. Julian followed, unsure of where to stand, what to touch, how to exist in a space that wasn't built around him. The door opened then. Lena stepped inside, cheeks flushed from the cold, frustration written all over her face. She froze when she saw him still there. "You didn't leave," she said flatly. "No," Julian replied. "I was asked not to." Her gaze flicked to her mother, who shrugged. "I asked." Lena exhaled sharply. "Of course you did." She kicked off her shoes and stopped when she noticed the candles, the darkened room. Great. Trapped with unresolved trauma and no electricity. Julian almost smiled. Almost. They sat around the small dining table, candlelight flickering between them. The shadows softened Julian's sharp edges, made him look less like a man who owned cities and more like someone who had waited too long to show up. No one spoke for a while. Then Lena broke the silence. "So," she said, staring at the flame. "Are you going to say it?" Julian stiffened. "Say what?" "The part where you explain how someone disappears for 23 years and then reappears like this is a coincidence." He met her eyes. "It wasn't a coincidence." She laughed quietly. "At least you're honest." "I didn't know about you," he said again, softer now. "But I did know about your mother. And I knew what I walked away from." "Why?" she asked. The question hung there, unshielded. Julian didn't answer immediately. He looked at the candle, at the melted wax pooling at its base. "Because I was afraid," he said finally. "And because I believed being successful would make up for being absent." Lena swallowed. Did it? No. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her more than any excuse could have. The power flickered briefly, then died again. Lena leaned back in her chair, eyes closing. "This is unreal." "Yes," Julian agreed. "It is." But for the first time, unreal didn't mean impossible. They were forced to sit, to share air, to let silence do its work. And somewhere between the candlelight and the darkness, the walls Lena had built so carefully began to show the smallest cracks, not from forgiveness, but from curiosity. The power didn't return that night. By morning, the candles had burned down to stubs, and the apartment felt strangely suspended in time, like the world had paused just long enough to let the truth surface without interruption. Lena woke first. She lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of an unfamiliar morning. The kettle in the kitchen, a chair scraping softly against the floor, someone moving carefully, as if afraid of making the wrong noise. She sat up. Julian stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, awkwardly holding a chipped mug like it might shatter if he gripped it too tightly. He looked different, less composed, less prepared. "Coffee?" he asked, tentative. Lena hesitated, then nodded once. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just participation. They sat at opposite ends of the table, steam rising between them like a fragile truce. "You said you didn't know?" Lena began, her voice steady but tight. "I believe you." Julian looked up, surprised. "But," she continued, "that doesn't mean you didn't leave." He nodded slowly. "I did." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Then tell me why." Julian leaned back, eyes drifting toward the window as if the past lived somewhere just beyond the glass. "I was younger," he said. "Not brave. I had just started building something that demanded everything I had. Time, focus, obsession." He paused. "And when your mother told me she was pregnant, I panicked." Lena's jaw clenched, but she didn't interrupt. "I told myself I'd come back," he went on. "That I just needed to stabilize things. That success would make me worthy." Her laugh was soft, bitter. "You outsourced love to the future." "Yes," he said, "and the future never came." Her mother joined them quietly, sitting between them not as a buffer this time, but as a witness. "I waited," she said calmly. "Not forever, just long enough to know I couldn't build a life on promises." Julian closed his eyes. "I know." Lena stared at the table. "Did you ever think about us?" "Every day," he said without hesitation. She looked up sharply. "That's not comforting." "I know," he repeated, "because thinking isn't showing up." Silence followed, heavy, but honest. Her mother reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box, sliding it across the table toward Julian. "You should see this," she said. Julian hesitated before opening it. Inside were fragments of a life he'd never touched. A hospital bracelet, a faded birthday card, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, one noticeably distant from the other two. Julian's breath caught. "She asked about you," her mother said softly. "I never lied. I just didn't fill in the blanks." Lena watched his reaction closely, the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes glassed over without spilling. Now you know, she said. So what? Julian looked at her not with authority, not with guilt, but with something raw and unguarded. So I stay, he said. If you'll let me. Lena swallowed. Staying isn't redemption. No, he agreed. But it's where it starts. She stood, pacing once before stopping in front of him. You don't get to be my father just because you're ready now, she said. I know. But, she added quietly, you can earn the right to be in my life. That was the closest thing to mercy he'd been given in 24 years. Outside, the city slowly powered back on. Inside, something far more fragile had just begun. The power returned in the afternoon. Lights flickered back to life, the heater hummed, and the refrigerator groaned awake like nothing extraordinary had happened. But something had happened. The air in the apartment felt lighter, still fragile, but no longer hostile. Julian didn't reach for his phone when it buzzed again. Instead, he followed Lena into the kitchen as she began preparing lunch with practiced ease. No help requested. No instructions given. He watched quietly, learning the rhythm of her movements, the way she leaned her hip against the counter when she chopped vegetables, the subtle confidence in her posture. You cook? He asked. Everyone eats, she replied. Some of us learn how. The edge in her voice was softer now, less sharpened by pain. Julian nodded. I mostly don't. She glanced at him, then smirked. Shocking. It was the first moment that didn't hurt. They ate together, simple food, uneven conversation. Julian told small stories, careful ones. The first office he ever rented. The deal that nearly broke him. Lena shared pieces too: college stress, a job she tolerated more than loved, dreams she hadn't fully named yet. Her mother watched from the doorway, saying little, her expression unreadable. Later, Lena grabbed her coat. I'm going to the store. Julian looked up. I'll come. She hesitated. Then, after a beat, okay. Outside, the city felt different now. Julian walked beside her, not leading, not lagging, just present. People passed them without a second glance. No recognition. No deference. This is strange for you, isn't it? Lena said. Being invisible? He asked. Yes. Julian smiled faintly. It's grounding. They stopped at a crosswalk. A bus roared past, wind tugging at Lena's scarf. Without thinking, Julian reached out and steadied it. The touch was brief, unassuming, but Lena felt it all the same. They didn't pull away. At the store, Lena grabbed a carton of milk, frowned, then swapped it for another brand. I hate that one, she muttered. Julian noticed, filed it away, not as trivia, but as something sacred. Back at the apartment, they sat again, closer this time. You don't have to impress me, Lena said suddenly. I'm not trying to, Julian replied. She studied him. Then what are you doing? He met her gaze. Listening. That, more than anything, softened her. That evening, laughter slipped into the room, unexpectedly quiet, hesitant, but real. A shared memory misremembered. A story told wrong on purpose. A moment where pain loosened its grip. For a brief stretch of time, it felt possible. Not healed, not forgiven, but human. And that was dangerous. Because just when you begin to believe safety exists, life reminds you what it costs. The call came just after midnight. Julian's phone vibrated against the table, sharp and insistent, cutting through the fragile calm they'd built over the day. He glanced at the screen and felt his chest tighten. Mara. He hesitated. Lena noticed. Of course she did. You should answer that, she said quietly. Julian shook his head. It can wait. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply stood and looked at him in a way that made his refusal feel heavier than any demand. That life, she said, nodding toward the phone, never waits. The truth of it stung. Julian picked it up and stepped into the hallway, closing the door gently behind him. Where are you? Mara's voice was tight, controlled panic barely hidden beneath professionalism. The board is spiraling. The press has confirmed you're missing. We need a statement, something. I'm fine, Julian said. I'll be back soon. Soon isn't a plan. It's all I have right now. There was a pause. Then, quieter. Are you with her? Julian closed his eyes. Yes. Mara exhaled. Then you should know the board hired a private firm. They traced your car. They know the neighborhood. Julian's blood ran cold. You did what? They're trying to protect the company, she said. They don't care about personal complications. Julian ended the call without another word. When he turned back, Lena was standing in the doorway. How long? She asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. They know where I am. Her face hardened instantly. You told them. No, but my absence did. She laughed once, sharp and wounded. So this was never just about us, was it? It was, Julian said urgently. It is. But you brought them here anyway, she shot back. Into my life. Into our space. Her mother emerged from the bedroom, alarmed by the raised voices. What's happening? The Empire found him, Lena said flatly. Just like I said it would. Julian stepped forward. I didn't mean for this to happen. That doesn't matter, Lena replied. It did. The knock came then firm, authoritative, unmistakable. 3 sharp raps on the door. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Julian felt 20 years collapse into that moment. All the times he'd chosen distance over discomfort. All the times he'd believed he could control the fallout later. Lena moved first. She walked past him, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the door. What are you doing? Julian asked, panic rising. I'm removing myself, she said without turning back. Before I disappear again. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, stopping just long enough to look at him one last time. You don't get to find me when it's convenient, she said softly. And you don't get to keep me when it's complicated. Then she was gone. The door closed. The knock remained. Julian didn't answer it. He stood there, in the quiet wreckage of hope, realizing that the thing he feared most had finally happened. Not exposure, not scandal, but losing her again the moment he started to believe he didn't deserve to. Julian didn't open the door. The knocking stopped eventually, replaced by the low murmur of voices in the hallway: security, legal counsel, damage control, already assembling themselves into a narrative that didn't include truth. He leaned his forehead against the door, eyes closed, and for the first time in decades, he didn't feel powerful. He felt late. When he finally stepped outside, the hallway was empty. The silence felt earned, not peaceful. He returned to the living room, where the candles had burned down completely, leaving only wax scars on the table. Proof that something real had existed here and had ended. His phone buzzed again. Board messages. Investor panic. A draft press release labeled urgent. Julian stared at the screen, then did something that would later be described as unprecedented. He turned it off. Across town, Lena walked until her feet hurt. She didn't know where she was going, only where she couldn't stay. Each step felt like reclaiming something she'd lost years ago. Control. Choice. Dignity. She stopped under a streetlight, breath fogging in the cold air. You don't get to keep me when it's complicated. She meant it, but meaning it didn't make it easier. Her phone vibrated. Mom. She answered this time. I know why you left, her mother said gently. And I won't ask you to come back. Lena swallowed. Good. But, her mother continued, I will ask you one thing. What? Don't decide who he is based on who he used to be. Lena closed her eyes. That's not fair. No, her mother agreed. But neither is pretending people can't change. They ended the call without resolution, without closure. That night, Lena barely slept. And neither did Julian. At dawn, Julian stood in front of the board. Not in person, not behind glass. On camera. No legal buffer. No PR framing. Just him. I took 24 hours, he said calmly, because I realized I had spent 20 years avoiding the most important parts of my life. A ripple of unease crossed the faces on the screen. This company will survive honesty, he continued. What it won't survive is leadership built on absence. Someone tried to interrupt. Julian raised a hand. I am stepping back, he said. Not permanently, but meaningfully. If that costs me control, so be it. Silence. Then chaos. But Julian felt something unfamiliar as the call ended. Relief. He found Lena the only place he knew she would go when everything felt too loud. The old footbridge near the river. She stood there, hands gripping the railing, watching the water move steadily forward unbothered by hesitation or regret. Julian approached slowly. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me, he said. She didn't turn. Good. I'm here to tell you what I chose. That got her attention. He told her everything. The board, the statement, the risk, the decision to dismantle parts of the machine he'd built rather than let it crush what mattered. When he finished, he waited. No defense, no demand. Lena finally faced him. You didn't do this for me, she said carefully. No, Julian replied. I did it because I finally understood what I lost when I didn't. She searched his face, not for guilt this time, but for consistency. What happens tomorrow? She asked. Julian's answer was immediate. I show up, he said. Whether you want me near or far. I stay honest. And I accept whatever role you decide I earn. The wind moved between them. This time, Lena didn't step away. 24 hours after Julian Cross vanished, he returned. Not to applause, not to outrage, but to truth. The press conference was brief, controlled, almost anticlimactic. The real story, the one that mattered, was happening elsewhere. Julian didn't go back to the penthouse that night. He went to a small apartment where the lights were warm and the door opened slowly. Lena stood there, uncertain but not closed. I'm not ready to call you my father, she said. Julian nodded. I wouldn't ask you to. But, she continued, voice steady, I'm willing to let you earn the word. That was enough. Weeks passed, then months. Julian learned the quiet work of consistency, showing up without spectacle, listening without correcting, loving without claiming ownership. Lena led him in piece by piece, not as a miracle, but as a man learning late. And her mother, who had carried the weight longest, finally rested. One evening, as they sat together by the river again, Lena spoke without looking at him. You know, she said, you didn't vanish for 24 hours. Julian smiled softly. No. You vanished for 23 years, she said. And then you came back. She turned to him then, something warm and real in her eyes. That counts. Julian Cross lost nothing that mattered. He gained everything he once believed success could replace. Do you believe love can arrive late and still be real, or does timing define truth? If this story moved you, share your thoughts below, subscribe for more emotional stories, and stay with us for the ones that remind us it's never too late to choose what matters.